We
This
have here
conference
tonight,
will now
we have
be
Lake
recorded.
Commissioner Heather Buck is running a table. Lane County Health and Human Service Director Eve Gray. Lane County Human Services Division Housing Manager Kate Budd. Senators Wyden and Merkley staff are online. We have Brenda Wilson, the Executive Director of Lane Council of Governments. Thank you for assisting and hosting a table for us. And we have all of our city councilors here hosting tables. And then other members of the community are also hosting. So I want to thank all of those that are taking the time to help host this. This is going to be the key part of this event, is the host gathering the information. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Just a quick guess, it looks like we've probably got over 200 people in here, so that's really nice. Homelessness is a major issue throughout the state of Oregon, facing every community in the state, whether from Mosier to Portland. Working with the Oregon Mayors Association, we've created a task force to address homelessness with 25 mayors throughout the state. It's a problem that we're facing everywhere. The mission of the city of Cottage Grove is to promote a vibrant community by providing a foundation of services for all. This discussion tonight has the goal to provide the city council with additional input they need to move forward with that mission for all members of the community. The information presented tonight is a direct result of staff from regular meetings with stakeholders and other leaders throughout the community over the last 2 years. Thank you for everyone that has worked with staff to explore options for our community. The City Council has been discussing and receiving issues and reviewing the issues during the last 3 months. This evening, we will be presented with information that has been presented to the City Council over the last 3 months. There's a lot of information presented and discussed. In order to hear from the widest possible collection of individuals tonight, we will not be taking any input or testimony from the microphone. That would allow us to hear from about 10 to 12 people every hour. Tonight, we want to hear from everyone. The quiet and the loud, the timid and the assertive. We have set up tables with hosts. The discussion and comments will occur at the tables and throughout an online polling, responsibly collected and compiled for the council. Those virtually attending will be at a large virtual table. During presentation, there will be questions provided on the screen. We can answer those using our phones and computers or by accessing the website. So this is going to be a long evening. There's snacks on the table. There's additional water and soft drinks at the side table. If you must get up, please get up quietly. The restrooms are located on the hallway just outside over on the east side of the building. We've asked staff and legal counsel to do this presentation. So for the online polling and instructions on how to do that, I'm going to bring up City Manager Richard Myers to do that and then go into our presentation. Thank you.
So just for your information, the polling, if you haven't gotten it on your phone yet, you need to go to a browser on your phone. It is a website. It's not loading an app or anything like that. And go to the address on the page, or you can snap a picture. There are of the QR codes. You can scan that and put that in your phone. If you haven't done that and you want to answer on cards, that's fine. The table hosts have some 4x6 cards there, and you can answer that way as well. Please put your number of the question on the card and for the response, so we can key it in and put it in the right place, because we'll be entering those in. So if everybody's loaded in your information, for the first question, oops, needs to be on the page here. Uh-oh, come on. So the first question we want to do is, using your phone, computer, if you will tap approximately where you live. It's a little hard on your phone. You'll probably miss by a block or two, but our phones are usually bigger than the block. But if you tap on it, and it'll show the point where you picked on your phone. Just leave it there, and you're ready and set for the next question. When the next question comes up in the presentation, it will appear on your phone or your tablet or your personal device, or if it goes online, it will appear on your computer screen if you're using your computer screen. We do have some open-ended questions tonight, and so it would require some typing. And if you are not younger than, 60, then you may not want to type. So if you don't want to type, please use the cards and ask your table host for a card, and you can write out your answer there and we'll enter that in. But what are you supposed to do if you do that? Put your number on it, put the number of the question on there, and make sure that's there. So, any questions on the polling? This one doesn't have a number. This one's just kind of a fun free-for-all to show how many people we have from all over the community here tonight. We have a lot, and that's great. That's wonderful. This would be question number 1, really. We don't need to fill a card out for this one. This is just kind of a fun test run to see how to use your phone. So we'll get started. Thank you. I'm going to sit down. I don't know what it is for the guest phone. You know the password? Sure. No,
For all of you online, if you look at the top of that slide, you can see the web address if you haven't already gotten it.
Okay.
Being able to participate.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. We're here to talk about homelessness and the issues that have arisen as a result of a lot of some court cases and our legislative acts by our legislature. They have mandated and required that local governments now get to deal with homelessness.
Hey, you're taking my stuff.
So we're going to talk about that tonight. And with me tonight is our city attorney, Carrie Connolly. I want to make sure to introduce her and thank her for being here. She'll be handling a lot of the legal part of the discussion. And we've been working on this for over 2 years, meeting with stakeholders in the community and community leaders, talking about options and suggestions and ideas, gathering information on how and what to do regarding homelessness. Don't want to go there yet. Homelessness. This is a really simple definition that Portland State University put out. It is, homelessness is lacking regular access to safe, adequate, or stable housing. Lane County has defined it a little more descriptive, that if a person reports sleeping in an emergency shelter, such as the Eugene Mission, our warming shelters, a legal alternative shelter, such as a camping program or a Conestoga hut, or on the streets, in a vehicle, or in a place that is not meant for human habitation. That's the definition of homelessness in Lane County. Other programs have different definitions. In the school system, there's a program called the McKinney-Vento program. Their program is a little broader definition regarding what homelessness is, and it includes youth that are couch surfing, staying with friends. They're counted in that. The homeless definition that we're using for adults doesn't include that. So our first question for tonight, this should pop up. Oh no, we've lost internet. This was working so well earlier today. Let's see if we can. Let's go out. Back in. It's there. Come on, there we go. So our first question that you need to get the answer to is, have you ever experienced homelessness? So if you'll answer yes or no to that, for those that are online or using your phones, we'll give you a little bit and we'll be able to see. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Have you ever experienced homelessness?
For those of you who came in late,
So far,
right
we have
there at the top of the slide,
127 responses,
you can go
and out
there.
of that, it looks like about 26% have experienced homelessness sometime. See how many we
The
had?
address is also in the chat.
134. So good. So the next question. Do you know anyone who has experienced homelessness or is experiencing homelessness? $127 now, so we'll show the responses. 83% so far know someone who has experienced homelessness or is experiencing. And then these will change for those that are filling these answers out on cards. We'll key those in later, but this is information we'll share with the council. 150 people so far have responded, 151. So we're about 80%. Why is there homeless? This is a question that's puzzled people for a long time and in the discussions. Why do we have homelessness? There's a wonderful report, and we have some copies on the side table. We also have on our website a copy of this report from Eco Northwest that they did for the Oregon Community Foundation. It's Homelessness in Oregon, a review of trends, cases, and policy options. It's a great report, and they summarize really well the #1 cause for homelessness. Their #1 cause that they find in their report is, and looking at this quote here, is Oregon's high rents make the crisis more severe than those in most states. Left unabated, they will continue to contribute to growing homeless population going forward. Oregon has not expanded its emergency shelter capacity to match the size of its homeless population, and in 2018 had the second highest rate of unsheltered homeless people in the country. Homelessness is difficult to predict. That's a myth. Economists John Quigley and Stephen Raphael have shown that housing affordability can predict the severity of homelessness. One formula shows that 10% increase in rent leads to a 6.5% increase in the rate of homelessness. West Coast, Oregon, California, and Washington face higher rates of homelessness. That part is true, but due to their lax laws and providing shelters. That's not true. The West Coast faces one of the largest affordable housing crises in the country, which has been identified as the #1 cause of homelessness. This chart, it's a little hard for you to see, but it's in the report, shows the impact of homelessness. And I'm going to turn on my drawing thing so you can see it here, if I can find my mouse. Where's the mouse? Here, mouse. This column on this side is the number of homeless count per 10,000. Down here is the median rent. Oregon, Washington, California, New York, and Hawaii are the worst in the country. A lot of people think that drug addiction, meth use, is a big contributor to homelessness. The meth capitals of the United States, Kentucky, Tennessee, they're down here. So this is showing us that it truly is, homelessness is directly tied to the affordability and availability of housing. I need to get rid of that so I can move forward. Here's a chart that Zillow, and Zillow helps us with housing and shows us whether, we can go on and look at people's houses and see inside pictures for something that's happened many years ago or things like that. They also did some research, and they found that at 22%, using their share of income, of 22% of their income on rent, the number of homeless change, the trend line. And the blue line is the actual numbers of the homeless rate. The red lines are the trend lines. So at 22%, that trend line starts going kind of at a slow pace. Then at 32%, the trend line changes. and it goes up again. And so this is part of that study that the economists did, that when you have that 10% increase, you see more increase in homelessness. Oregon's population is about 1.3% of the whole US population. Our population of those experiencing homelessness is 2.6% of the total US population experiencing homelessness. Twice as much as what we should be. We should be at 1.3, just like our normal population. Chronic homelessness in Oregon represents 4.5% of the total US population of chronically homeless. Cottage Grove has a problem too. And we conducted our housing needs analysis in 2018. In that analysis that was done, it was found that we needed 1,379 new housing units to be constructed between 2018 and 2038. And that's an average of 69 new units each year. Our graph down here shows the different income levels of housing units. And on the far left, you're right, you're looking at the screen, you're right, is the high income level. We need about 19%. On the far left is the extremely low income. These are people with less than 30% of the median family income. We need 280 units. 20% of the new housing units that we need are in the extremely low. 26% are in the very low. That's another 354. And if you throw low income in there, there's another 178. We're looking at, 59% of the housing units that need to be built between 2018 and 2038 need to be in that low income category. Currently, we have about 120 units that have been built. We've sparked some new multifamily rental units construction going on, but most of those are in the middle to high income level. Some of those middle income pieces will probably bring some of the low income up into those middle, and we might see some additional currently middle incomes drift into the low income, but probably not down to the very low or the extremely low. This shows in the 2018 numbers what those income levels would be in those categories. $19,000 for a household with a monthly rent of only being able to afford about $480. That's a cashier, grocery store. All the way up to your middle income, not your middle income, but your low income in the middle, $51,000. Those are pretty substantial numbers that represent what's going on in our community, and these are 2018 numbers. In discussions about homelessness, we regularly hear, and so this is a writing one, it will appear on your phones, and if you want to answer it on a card, we regularly hear, we don't want to be like Eugene, Portland, or Salem. What does that mean? So what does that mean to you? We'll give you some time to answer that.
For those who came in late, if you look in the chat window, you will see a link that will take you to the webpage where you can respond to this question.
So table hosts, go ahead and spark a conversation at your table about this. And if anybody wants to write that down on their card, go ahead and start thinking about what that means to you and what you do. And enter it on your phone. We've got 11 people already.
If you're interested in mentioning about Jake, so there's 60 people online already.
That's a 55 or whatever.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And if anyone has anything they'd like to say about this during the typing and discussing period, there are enough of us here that I'm seeing very tiny, tiny little squares. So maybe activate your camera or unmute your mic so I can, mute it and unmute it a couple times so I can see it flashing.
Yeah.
Or you don't have to, you can just type it.
So it's good.
Okay, Carly Shedback and Mike Cook, it looks like. Go ahead.
We'll give you about another minute. We have 106 people who have answered already, so another minute. For your information, we have about 60 people online in addition to the almost 200 we have here in the room. So thank you for coming.
Go ahead, Carly and Mike, if you wanted to say something. Okay, if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
They're supposed to be. So they were so I wrote that forward.
Okay, it looks like they're reconnecting, perhaps.
The Fazio is good. They're going to come talk to me after this. So. Yeah, I think she might be here. Oh.
All right, hello, new folks. Right now, if you click on the chat window, you should be able to see a link where we're answering the question that you see on your screen there about the phrase, "We don't want to be like Eugene," or Portland or Salem.
Okay. So hopefully everybody who's typed it in on their phone has done it. We have 32 responses online. We will compile these, everything you've written, and if you write it on your card and put number 4 on it for the question, these will all be presented to the council. So all of these questions will be compiled, and we actually have a way to kind of sort them by keywords in the answers. So it'll really be a neat feature for the council to be able to look at these. We will have this available online too for anybody who's interested in looking at the results of the polls. We won't show the open-ended questions because it takes so long to see all of them, 138 of them. But you can get the actual document when we're done, and we'll have all those compiled. So I'm going to move off, and those that are still typing won't be able to type anymore. Looks like we're at 140. So another myth. There are plenty of shelter beds available in Eugene for the homeless in Lane County. The fact is there are enough shelter beds to serve fewer than half of those experiencing unsheltered homelessness in Lane County. The total homelessness in Lane County is 4,003. That's the January 2022 number from the homeless by name list. Lane County and Cottage Grove as well has moved away from the PIT count, the point in time count. It's always been a troubling thing. HUD has a program where every year, once a night, you go out and try to find homeless and count them. Very poor number. I mean, how can you find them and count them and do that? The homeless by name list is basically compiled from all of the service organizations, the food shelters, the missions, the bus services, those services that are providing a service to people in the community. And one of the questions on that intake form is, are you homeless? And so this is a number that is actually more reflecting what's actually going on in the community, those people that are homeless. Now, some of them are rolling homeless. They're living in a vehicle and moving around. Some of them may be homeless, but they're in somebody's garage, or they're couch surfing or moving around that way. But we have 4,003 homeless in Lane County as of January. The shelter beds in Lane County, and this includes our warming shelters, 1,934. There is not enough shelter in Lane County, even for the homeless in Eugene. Homeless in Eugene is 3,136. And so the rest of the county is considerably lower than Eugene. Here's the count for Lane County. There's Eugene on the bottom, the big long blue line at 3,136. Springfield at 401. Cottage Grove, 188. Florence has 133. Oak Ridge 37, and then you get into the 20s and 13s and the 2s and 1s, all the way to Notai with their 1. There's 28 that are unrepresented and unknown where they're residing. Our local indicators, we have some other information that we've gathered that kind of helps us get an idea of what kind of homelessness we have in Cottage Grove. Our warming shelters this year, their season ended on March 31st, and so we have the December through March numbers. The big light blue line, that's the tallest line, that is the total number of guests that stayed. So over that period of time in December, somebody may have stayed at 5 of the nights that they were open, or 10 of the nights that they were open. In December, they were open 10 nights. They had 134 guests. 37 of them were unduplicated guests. That means they're unique. 13 of them is the average. The average night stay in December were 13 guests. In January, we were open 8 nights, and 111 guests stayed with 40 unique people. 14 was the average in January. February, we had 7 nights that the community sharing was operating the warming shelter. 121 guests. We were 7 nights, and we were more guests than we'd been in January at 8 nights. So we had 43 unique guests, with 17 being the average. And then in March, we didn't have as many activations in March. Weather's starting to get nicer. 4 activations, 57 guests total, 27 unique, with an average of 14 again. So the total numbers, we had 413 guests stay at the warming shelter over the course of the year this year, the season. 78 of those were unduplicated. So we had 78 homeless that were in the community, and over the course of those 29 activation nights, 2 people were from outside the area. All the others had service, where they'd contacted some service in Cottage Grove, and were here as Cottage Grove residents. They'd been here for a while and had services here. We also have a mobile shower. The city purchased a mobile shower unit with CARES Act money, and we've been operating it since July of 2021. And so we've seen some numbers happen there, and community sharing is operating that at the Community Sick Sharing Center down there. Where are you at? Birch? Is that? Yeah. And so we've been operating it, and here are the totals for the month there. And you can see the trend line going up as well. And we're averaging of unduplicated, unique individuals every month, about 30 of homeless people coming to the shower trailer on Wednesdays from 11 to 3. So if you know someone who needs a shower, that you know someone who would like to take advantage of the opportunity to use the shower. If you have teenagers, they need a shower all the time. But on Wednesdays from 11 to 3, the shower is available, and it's free. And there's clothing there, and there's services there as well. And we've been able to contact with a lot of our homeless population. And that, coupled with some of the other things we're doing in the community, we've seen success already. We've seen people get cleaned up and get the job and start getting counseling and starting to move out of homelessness. But there's one thing that still blocks them, and that's housing. There's no permanent housing still. So some of the people we've gotten jobs and gotten them moving and getting their ID and getting things squared away, they're still homeless and they've got a job, but they're still homeless in the community. So question 5, talk among your table. How would you solve homelessness in Cottage Grove? Good question.
All right, again, you've got this on the browser, so if anyone would like to say anything, why
We'll
flash
give you about
the
5 minutes to talk at your table and put some answers up. And you're next.
I'm not seeing any flashing mute buttons at the moment, so I'm going to assume you're all busily typing.
And I think there's some questions in there that you can either ask or I'll ask.
Okay, I thought I saw a flash there from Carly and Mike. Can I give this a shot again? Maybe we can hear you this time. You are muted right now.
You can't choose all of them. It's kind of a trick question. Because if you choose this one, you're not going to choose that one. Yeah. It's like you can only choose 4, but you get to choose all of them. Yes. I'm going to listen to see Jake's doing.
Okay, if all else fails and you're unable to be heard, and if for whatever reason you're not able to get all your thoughts into the web-based thing, you can always type something up or write something up, deliver it to City Hall, and we will make sure it gets added to this packet. So that way the city councilors can still get all of your comments, questions, concerns, etc. Owner, do you want to say something? Jim, name just changed. Are you able to speak, Jim? Not hearing anything from you either. Now I'm wondering if it's me or if it's... Would someone else mind unmuting and just saying something so I can verify that the sound on this is working?
Something.
Hi, Jake.
Okay, hi. Yep, I can hear people. All right. So I think just a couple folks are having some maybe connection difficulties.
Jake, the chat is disabled, so I can't put anything in there, just to let you know. I don't have anything to put in there right now.
The chat's supposed to be disabled for public record reasons. It's a pain in the neck to get the stuff out of there, so we leave those turned off. But I did drop the link in there so that folks can get to the question. I assume everybody's got that pretty well figured out. sorry I can't provide you all with snacks. All the folks at the Armory have them. We don't. So if any of you pop in at City Hall tomorrow, there may be some leftover snacks you could grab. Jim, it looks like you're trying to talk. Is there any chance you have your microphone turned down low or something? Yeah, we're just not hearing you, Jim.
If that Jim you're talking to is me, I'm not trying to talk.
Oh, okay, that was you. I saw you're unmuted, and there was some, maybe a little bit of background noise then lighting up your.
I'm still trying to figure out your buttons here.
Okay, no worries then.
I think I do finally have it all figured out. It took me 3 times just to get in, but
Oh,
I think I'm pretty much in.
glad you made it.
Me too. This is important. I'm originally from Portland, so I know exactly how things can get.
Yeah, so you've seen some of this stuff.
Oh boy. Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to mute some folks, not because y'all are making noise, but that way the little green light will turn red, I think. It'll be easier for me to spot when somebody wants to speak, because they can, and if you want to talk, just light up your, unmute yourself, and that should light it up in green, so I'll be able to spot it easily.
So we'll wind up, we've got 116 that have entered in, so hopefully the rest of you have written on cards your answers, and we'll assemble those and present those to the council. We want to thank Representative Hayden. He's here tonight. He just popped in. He's at another event, and he came in, so thank him for coming and listening in as well. I'm going to turn the time over to our city attorney.
Hey, good evening. Thanks everyone for being here and for those tuning in. So as Richard mentioned, I'm Carrie Connolly. I'm with Local Government Law Group. I'm one of the attorneys from our firm that represents the city. And as Richard mentioned, we've been working on this issue since 2019. let's talk about why we've been working on it since 2019. So you all have just spent 5 or maybe more minutes, and probably the last 2 years, thinking to yourselves how you would solve homelessness. So now we're going to put your ideas to the test against what the law requires and what the law allows. In 2019, the Ninth Circuit, so that is a judge, it's a bank of judges actually that governs a number of states down the western seaboard. So it isn't just Oregon that's subject to this law. The entire United States is broken up into circuits. Ours is the Ninth Circuit. And so a Ninth Circuit judge and a bank of judges were aware of the data that Richard has been going over, the incidence of homelessness going up, the increase in housing costs. And as is usually the case, the way either the law changes to address the circumstances, or the way the law is applied changes to address circumstances in our society. And in this case, the Ninth Circuit changed the law, the way that it interprets the 8th Amendment of the United States, the federal Constitution. And what they found was that cities enforcing standard traditional prohibitions against sleeping in public parks around the clock, overnight, for any long period of time, those were deemed to be unconstitutional. So it is unconstitutional as of 2019 for a city or a county to enforce a law that penalizes sleeping outdoors on public property. And there's a little, the devil's in the details. Of course, it's unconstitutional unless there's alternative shelter available. So let's turn to the next slide to look at the details in a little more closely. And the details. Okay, can people hear me now? Can you hear me better? Thank you. Attendees. All right, so sounds really loud. I always project, so. A little bit. Okay, so there is a really critical footnote 8 in Martin v. Boise that was decided by the Ninth Circuit. And they were trying to issue a very narrow holding. And they said, we're not saying it's unconstitutional to apply your laws to people who have access to adequate temporary shelter. Maybe it's available because they can pay for it, or it's available to them for free, but they're choosing not to use it. So in those cases, enforcement officers were allowed to issue citations, but the problem is that required an individualized determination. So a city couldn't unilaterally say we're going to continue enforcing our laws, or necessarily say we're going to stop enforcing our laws. Although, as it came down to it, it's almost impossible to determine, does somebody have a realistically available temporary shelter? And so, as it turns out, cities started rolling back their enforcement of prohibitions on sleeping in parks and public property. I think that's a pretty good coverage of that. So, as is the case, one court says something, and then all the other courts and jurisdictions are put in the position of needing to interpret what in the world did that actually mean? How do we apply it in our city? And the city of Grants Pass, lucky them, was the test case. So they thought they were interpreting and applying Martin v. Boise appropriately. And as it turns out, they were being far too strict with its rules. So they said, well, we're letting people sleep on public property, but we're prohibiting them from using anything that's keeping them warm and dry. They weren't allowed to use blankets, pillows were confiscated, clearly no tents were allowed. And so they were taking Martin on its terms, and the court said, no, when we want people to be able to, when we're saying they need to be able to sleep in public property, on public property, they also need to be able to stay warm and dry. They need to be able to use efforts in order to remain comfortable and safe while sleeping on public property. So grants mass also tried to press that alternative shelter. And they tried 3 different prongs. They said, well, we can enforce our prohibition against sleeping on public property because people can go out to the BLM lands. People can go to rest areas along the I-5. People can go to temporary warming shelters, and or people can go to religious mission institutions where there's overnight sheltering. Now, the court looked at those and said, I'm sorry, but no, Mark v. Boise actually specifically said that where you're supposed to or you're required to participate in prayer as a condition of being fed and sheltered, that's not reasonably available for some individuals to whom that might be offensive. It's not in keeping with their personal belief system. Federal BLM land and rest stops are not available and are restricted. And warming shelters don't count as they are not regularly available. As Richard went through, we've had several evenings of openings month to month, but they're not open on a nightly basis. And then lastly,
Right.
we're not imposing criminal penalties, we're only imposing civil penalties. And the court again says no, you're penalizing the human condition of being unhoused, and that's unconstitutional. So that was 2020. So the Oregon legislature weighed in 2021 and said, we need to try to consolidate these rules. We need to try to give communities some time to bring their codes into compliance with what we think is fair and equitable under the law. And so HB 3115 has been adopted. Cities, Cottage Grove is working to comply with it, but it actually doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2023. Right? Too loud?
Yeah, we were cutting off, so go ahead, keep going.
Okay, all right. Oh, we're gonna get this right. So HB 3115, currently we're still operating under the 2 court cases that I talked about. The city needs to comply with those in its enforcement and amendment of city code. We'll talk about that in a minute. But HB 3115 is what we're really aiming for to comply with. We need to get a plan in place to say, what are we going to be able to do so our code is enforceable and we're being fair and equitable under the law. So what 3115 says is that a city or county law that regulates sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors, it has to be objectively reasonable as to time, place, and manner. And it's not time, place, and manner with regards to the housed, it's with regards to persons experiencing homelessness. And we'll give you concrete examples of what that looks like in a minute. I just want to get through these prongs. It is an affirmative defense to a charge of violating the city or county law that it's not objectively reasonable. And so that means that if Cottage Grove officers issue a citation, and it's a time, place, and manner citation, which means you're not allowed in the park after 5 p.m. You aren't allowed in the library. Well, this is all actually outdoors, so I won't talk about that. But you can't be loud after the hours of 10 p.m., for instance. If that's not objectively reasonable for a person who's unhoused, then it is not in compliance with 3115. We have to look at everything. We have to look at where the alternative locations are for these unhoused to go, to alternative shelters. We have to look at alternative public property that's available to these individuals. And let's see, and then the final kind of is you're needing to amend your code to comply basically with Martin and Blake. You also, if you don't amend your code, and I'm saying you collectively, this is the city, could face a challenge in which the challenger could obtain attorney's fees for not having amended your code in a way that complies with 3115. So with that, city would receive a 90-day notice, but if an amendment isn't adopted in that period of time, then the challenger can go to court and just say, on its face, the code provisions that are being enforced in this town that are just on the books are not in compliance with 3115, and if the judge agrees, then the city needs to pay that individual's attorney's fees. So there's some teeth here. We really want to comply with this, not only because it's the right thing to do, not only because it's the law, but also because there's some money behind it. There's some liability associated with it. So next page. Okay, so now we're going to move on to talking about what does this look like in your community. So the minimum that your city is required to do is to stop sanctioning individuals, stop issuing citations for anybody who's camping, sleeping on public property when there's no alternatives available. We talked about that a little bit. We realized it's almost impossible for an officer in the moment to determine, does this individual have an alternative shelter to go to, unless the city is actually providing one and the officer knows that space is available. So if that's the case, maybe a citation is appropriate, or you could move the individual to that available shelter that the officer knows for a fact is available to this individual in that moment. The other thing that is required, minimum that's required, amend existing city ordinances to remove all language that regulates the sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors on public property that's open to the public. So we have a code example here. I'm going to take some water. So if we were just going to do the bare minimum, look at I that we have crossed out here. It is not okay for the city to maintain this law that made it unlawful for a person to camp out or sleep in any park area at such time when the park is closed. That's the basic tenet of that code provision. And based on the law we just talked about, we got to strike it. It's just got to be dropped from your code. We can keep certain activities that are, include but not limited to group picnicking, camping, group camping, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. We can restrict those occasionally as needed by the city manager. But K also then has to come out, which made it unlawful for any person. And these provisions are currently in your code right now. And this is the advice that we're giving to the city manager and the council, which is I and K at the bare minimum have to come out. So you can't prohibit persons from entering or remaining in the park from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. You just can't do it. Unless we try to craft around the law that we've covered. So the minimum action under court case and state law would result in camping, sleeping, lying, keeping warm and dry, being allowed on all outdoor public property within the city limits of Cottage Grove, including all public property, parks, right-of-ways, sidewalks, and planting strips. So I'm guessing that some people, in response to their question, we keep hearing we don't want to be like Eugene, Portland, Salem, and what does that look like? It's highly likely that some of you outlined exactly this circumstance. We don't want people sleeping in all of our parks all the time, in all of our right-of-ways, our sidewalks, and our planting strips. I don't know, because we don't know the answers, but I strongly suspect that was at least one or two of the answers.
So here's your opportunity to weigh in on those. The city should do more than just the minimum required under case law and state statutes. Do you agree, somewhat agree, remain neutral, somewhat disagree, or disagree? If you can take that poll. So the minimum would be the things that Carrie just talked about, removing the sanctions, no punishment or anything associated with camping, sleeping, lying, staying warm and dry on public property, and also fixing the code.
Excuse me?
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you.
Yes, great. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. I believe I have a solution or a possible solution to some of these issues that we're facing. I've been speaking back and forth with the council and council members about
That's not included in the definition.
training house community.
The city can maintain fires.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry. The Armory cannot hear us, so they don't know that they're talking over you right now.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. So basically, my name is Michael Oldcliff, and I've been speaking with the community coordinator and a few others. And my goal is to maybe do real estate renovation, possibly get some real estate renovation grants so that we
So
can
it does look like we
inform
have 55% that are saying that we do
interaction,
need to do more than just the minimum, that there needs to be some efforts to
that we can
beyond that bare minimum.
possibly provide rehab, educational rehab, as well as other interactive facilities to aim
So
to
we
get
have
the
another
homelessness
question for you.
back to
What
the
impact do you feel
society.
doing only the minimum required by court case law and state law would have on our community? So what will happen in our community? What do you feel is going to happen if we do only the minimum required by court case law and state law in our community? What will it be like? And this one you can talk at your table or write it on your cards or type it on your phone.
Okay, sorry about that. Could you, yeah, go ahead now. We had a special
Okay, great.
black time.
Yeah, long story short, my goal is to build a tiny house community that has interactive and educational rehab facilities to possibly end the crisis of the homelessness, especially in the Cottage Grove area.
Well, that sounds great. Were you here for the question about what would you do to solve the problem?
Yes, I put on the question that I would build a tiny house educational community center.
Okay. And if you would like,
I would, but.
give City Hall a call like tomorrow. You can call me on Jake Boone, and I'll get your information.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to say or throw out there? If you do, just flash your mute button on and off, and I'll hopefully spot it. Okay, not seeing any. I'll assume you're typing. Or just quietly pondering.
Jake,
Yes, go ahead.
did that slide that Richard had said that there was 188 homeless in Cottage Grove? Is that the number that was on there?
I believe that's correct. Let me double check here real quick. I have a printout. Yes, 188.
Okay, but that includes anybody
if you're
that could
typing
be
in,
in a
don't really
vehicle
finish.
or a tent
Yes.
or staying at someone's
Let's
home or anything like
finish
that.
up there. It looks like
Right.
slowing
Okay. All right,
down
thank
on the results coming in on entering in. We're at 111. Okay.
Oh, Valerie, I see your talk light is on. Did you want to speak or?
then.
Okay, we're picking up, moving on. All right, so we've now talked about the minimum required by the law. Let's talk about what the law allows. So the law does allow objectively reasonable time, place, and manner regulations with regards to persons experiencing homelessness. Remember, everything needs to be looked through the lens of the unhoused in order to determine what kinds of rules, regulations, and restrictions can we adopt and enforce. So, for instance, prohibitions on blocking sidewalks and right-of-ways. Martin v. Boise specifically called that out and said at some times certain types of restrictions may be constitutional, such as prohibitions on blocking sidewalks and rights-of-way. And you can understand that because that's a safety concern for everyone. Everyone uses rights-of-way. We need to be able to access, use those thoroughfares. Prohibiting safety risks. So HB 3115 specifically calls out, we can regulate fire and flames even when trying to allow people to stay warm and dry, because fire and flames really presents another major safety risk as you think about it. Overnight limits in some but not all city parks, that is also a reasonable restriction. So you can prioritize local parks and say, which are the ones we want to leave open 24/7, which ones do we want to have some enforced restrictions on, as long as other public areas remain available. We can enforce reasonable parking limits with notice. So a lot of unhoused are sleeping in cars and trying to comply with parking limitations. And as long as we are enforcing those parking limitations, but not eliminating all sleeping on the streets in vehicles, that is a reasonably objective time, place, and manner regulation. And then alternative shelter sites really is the linchpin to this analysis. If there is alternative available shelter, then local regulations have a much higher chance of being able to be adopted, deemed objectively reasonable and enforceable. And so that goes to the language of 3115 that was up a little earlier that talks about what a court is going to do to determine if you're in compliance with 3115 is they're going to look at the totality of circumstances. So are you, so if there is absolutely no place available, public property available, totality of the circumstances indicates that it's not reasonable. That's not objectively reasonable. If you have some parks available, if you're closing off right-of-ways, but you're leaving other areas open, if you're facilitating the availability of shelter that's reasonably available to individuals experiencing homelessness, all of those factors go together to for a judge to determine, is this community's code provisions enforceable? So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. You want as many factors at play so that you could argue to a court, our totality of the circumstances proves that we are being equitable. We are allowing sufficient areas, public areas, alternative shelters for our unhoused population. Okay, so if we then applying that objectively reasonable standard and reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions to the same code provision that we looked at before, instead of dropping I and K, instead we drop I, but we keep K, and instead of saying it's unlawful for any person to remain in any part or part thereof, instead we identify which parts it's unlawful to remain in. So community, neighborhood, and mini parks is one alternative. Maybe we limit or prohibit overnight camping in riparian or wetland areas that are sensitive, environmentally sensitive. And then if we limit those from 10 to 5, perhaps that meets the court's standard and the standard in 3115. Oh, crud. So the next question is actually, it's actually a question for you that perhaps is up on their personal iPhones.
No, it's not yet.
Oh, okay. All right, so I guess you're gonna have to wait. I'm gonna give you a sneak preview.
Did number 8 pop up on your phones? No.
So just so you can start thinking about it, it says, what additional actions should the city take to mitigate homelessness in Cottage Grove? And then it gives you a list. So maybe you're gonna think, maybe you'll mark, there you go. I'm gonna stop reading for you.
So you can choose all of those that apply, that you think would apply. And the last one, you wouldn't choose it if you were choosing the others, if you wanted to stick with the minimum. But you can choose all of these that you think might be things that you'd like to look at to help mitigate the homelessness issue on parks or streets. Or
I forgot, I also needed to clarify. I was informed that I said January 1st, 2023 is when HB 3115 goes into effect. It's actually July 1st. My apologies. Of 2023. The year was right, the month was wrong.
that's kind of fun to watch what you're actually doing. It might affect the results. I waited until there were 220 people responding already, so.
Don't go back.
Don't go back. I think I turned off, you can't go back. So.
Oh, okay.
$505 responses, because you can respond more than once.
Yeah. Who's tuned in?
Okay. The next question. Number 9, the city cannot prohibit camping outside on public property. Carrie has just talked to us about that, unless other space or alternative shelter is provided. Arrange the type of parks listed below in order with the parks that should prohibit camping on top. So how would you prioritize our types of parks? We have 5 separate types of parks here. Our community parks, and Coiner and Bohemia are those community parks. Our neighborhood parks are Fort Harrison Park, Kelly Field, Stewart Orchard Park. Greenway and nodal parks, those are one along the trail, the Trailhead Park, Veterans Park, Haskell Park, Willamette Greenway, mini parks, the skate park, Triangle Park, if you know where Triangle Park is. There is a map at your table if you don't know where some of these parks are. And then the regional parks, those are North Regional and Route River Nature Park. So go ahead and prioritize those. You can move them up and down in priority. So put the ones that you think are most important on the top. When you touch one of the buttons with the park's names on it, the little arrows will appear on the side, on the left-hand side, and you can slide them up and down. Or you can do it on the cards. Just write number 9 on it. We'll figure it out. But
This is so funny.
And as always, if you want to talk, just flash your mute icon.
But it works. But when you're talking about clicking, you need you close because it's chopping this area.
Oh, okay.
So if you hear the clicking, then you need to just back up a little bit.
I just thought I was buttons again.
I don't think we've ever had this many people in here before. Let's see what the results look like here. We'll get to, looks like we're slowing down. So when we hit 90, maybe we'll go a little higher. They're coming in quickly because we know we're gonna cut them off. Yeah, we'll give a little bit more time there and we'll show our result. So there's kind of the order that they popped out in. So we'll share that with the council and we'll add in the cards because some people answered with cards as well. Thank you. Got a few more coming in. We'll let them come in. Yeah. Those we guessed. So the next question, number 10, should the city develop shelter sites to prevent camping in city parks? Yes or no? Or the control. We'll stop right there. So there's the results so far. There's a few more coming in, not very many. It's through. Struggle with it.
Okay, so jumping back in with one last code modification. That's a possible, it's a possible presentation to the city council. The city council will be discussing whether it wants to add this language that's up on the screen to your code. Currently, there is no code provision that discusses or limits or guides camping in the right-of-way. And as I mentioned before, reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions should be enforceable, especially if other alternatives are available on public property. And therefore, we're proposing these restrictions that a person may camp in a vehicle in city right-of-way if it's parked in conformance with all established parking regulations. Currently, there's a 72-hour limit on city street parking. We're proposing, this is all, nothing's written in stone, but one possible provision would be the vehicle is not parked within 100 feet of a public or private school or public playground. The vehicle is not being repaired in the right-of-way. The vehicle is operational and can legally operate on the street, and no material items, supplies, or waste are on the street, sidewalk, bike lane, or planting strip. So those are provisions that we are, we've drafted. We think they are objectively reasonable. We think it's a good balance between allowing use of the right-of-way to sleep in vehicles, but not impede others' use of the right-of-way, allowing use just like anyone else, allowing sleeping in vehicles, but subject to these restrictions. And then another provision would be no camping in a tent, structure, shelter, or other non-vehicle allowed in the right-of-way, including bike lanes, sidewalks, and planting strips. So there we're allowing street usage, but not those otherwise needed daily passageways.
And I think that B item, and just to kind of throw some comments out on that, for those of you who saw the paper or the news in Salem, where the individual plowed into a group of people who were camping in the right-of-way or immediately adjacent to it, and 4 people died. That person's life is messed up as well now. He was intoxicated apparently, but he's also got 4 people that he killed as a result of that. And so these are some of those principles that I think we can easily defend, and I think Carrie has helped us in drafting these.
Okay, so I have heard that they are going to new telephone numbers that can be used to set 911 situation that you talked about, complicated homeless person, but you can call them 211. 511 and other than the police, keep
Yeah. And
Can you repeat that?
yeah. So great comment, and we ask if you have any questions or comments like that, please write them down on a card for that, and we'll enter those in. The comment was that there's other phone numbers that are now available, like 911, but there are 511 and 211, and there's various ones for information and stuff like that. That would be another alternative to help mitigate when there's issues or problems or the drunk driver or something like that that you can see. So yeah, those kind of comments or suggestions, please write them down on the cards, because if we start taking comments, we'll be here all night. We don't want to be here all night.
While Richard's bringing that up, I'm just going to sort of double down on the idea. As you can probably see by the way that we're formulating these code provisions, we're constantly trying to balance between safety for all members of the public, the unhoused and other members of society, and trying to craft something that is objectively reasonable for the unhoused, as well as maintains use of public property, public right-of-ways for all members of society. So just keep that in mind as you're reviewing these code options and providing feedback on them.
So, question for you. Currently, we have a 72-hour parking limit. That's the maximum limit. We have 2 and 3 hours as well, but the 72 hours on most of our streets in town that don't have those other limits. Should the city continue to use this to regulate vehicles being used for lodging on roadways? So basically what we do right now is for those rolling homeless, if they're there for 72 hours, they get tagged and they need to move. And they need to move to another location. I think it's 500 feet away. It's a distance specified in the code. Should we continue to use that to regulate vehicles being used for lodging on roadways? 72 hours. And that 72 hours is all vehicles. So if you store your brand new toy hauler fifth wheel on the street, in 72 hours, you will get a bright orange tag on it saying that you can't store your brand new 50-foot toy hauler on the street.
Is that just for things like toy haulers?
It's for any vehicle, all vehicles.
So if you live downtown, you have to park a couple of blocks away?
It's 72 hours constant. So this is constant. If you leave and come back and leave during the day and come back, that's not counted. It's
Not cumulative.
It's stored or parked there for 72 hours consecutively.
Now, how does that work for people who are having quarantine because of the pandemic?
We didn't do anything during the quarantine. We did very little. Yeah, right. We took exception there. Where am I? Let's get to 140. So on that one, it looks like 88% said we should continue to use the 72-hour parking. Another question for you. Should the city adopt any of the additional parking restrictions, those that we just talked about, for vehicles parked on the roadway? You can choose as many of these as you like. You can only choose them once, but you can choose all that apply. And as you make your choice, you may want to consider the totality of impact as well. That if these are choices that are applying to just vehicles that are people lodging in, these would be applying to any vehicle parking on the street. Oh, there's the results so far. That's good. Interesting. And number 13, should the city restrict camping on sidewalks, planting strips, and bike lanes? Good. And apparently 95% say we should do the restriction on sidewalks, planting strips, and bike lanes. Thank you. So, as we've talked about the minimum actions and the requirements under the law, one of the points we want to make is, and I think some of the answers that we've seen so far in the responses, is that the minimum action does not protect or enhance the quality of life of Cottage Grove. To protect the quality of life, we must consider the actions that we need to take to protect our parks for the enjoyment of all citizens, actions to protect the use of the public right-of-way for vehicle and pedestrian traffic and for safety issues, and actions to help those people in our community who have been thrust into homelessness. So we're moving into the part of what we're going to do. What are some of the things we're going to do? And this is a diagram. It's really hard to see on the graphic because we've got some small type, but it's 5 keys to effective emergency sheltering. And as we've been looking at this for the last 2.5 years, these are some of the principles that have pulled out, and this is from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, which I'll be completely optimistic or pessimistically optimistic that I don't think we'll ever end homelessness. Homelessness has been around since the first cave was used, and somebody didn't have a cave. So, I mean, we will always have homelessness. But if we can take and mitigate and get it to a point where we've got it handled and we've got a net zero gain, or how can we get some point where we're successful in maintaining and getting people back into permanent housing and being a part of the community again. And these key points are some of those key pieces that make it happen. Housing first. It's one of those approaches that we get them into housing. We get them into something so they don't have to concentrate on constantly finding a place to stay. In the last couple of months, we had a person actually die at the community center. He passed away in his tent. One of our staff found him, and one of our public works guys working at the property found him and found him deceased. He had terrible, terrible illnesses. He had diabetes and other issues associated with his lifestyle and just his condition. He was not able to take care of those things that he needed to take care of because he was constantly trying to find a place to stay. He neglected his health. He neglected those pieces that would have kept him alive. Some of the other residents that we had at the community center were helping him. They were getting his medicine for him. They were trying to get him to the doctor. They were trying to get him places, but that didn't help. I mean, he was constantly worrying about house. That's what we need to do first, and that's what they found is appropriate. Safe and appropriate diversion, getting people into a house or into sheltering and starting the training, starting the counseling, starting efforts to educate and get them back to the person that they once were. When they get on the street, whether they're there as a result of a traumatic accident or an injury or health issues at home or whatever, all of a sudden their life has changed and they've moved into a survival mode. You've got to start diverting those energies back to being a part of society and being a part of a community and supported by others. The process needs to be low barrier. We need to welcome everybody in and have them an opportunity to get in and get there. Our warming shelters operated by Community Sharing this year and last year, they're a low barrier facility. people can come to those intoxicated. They can come to those under the influence of drugs. They have to turn in everything and put it in a locker, but they can come there and they can be safe and stay warm. Same thing with this kind of sheltering. They can come there. They can't use it there. They can't have it there, but we want them to be able to come so that they can start addressing those needs. And then I think the biggest piece, that's the most important part associated with these 5 keys, is that it has to have the focus of getting them out of the shelter and into permanent housing. It's got to be that as the goal, that as quickly as we possibly can, moving them into permanent housing, whether that's permanent supportive housing or permanent housing in some form of a Conestoga hut or a tiny home or some type of one studio apartment. We need to get them into housing as soon as possible to end this or to get those, to reduce this and mitigate that. The challenge is we don't have housing. So that'll be part of the further discussion as we move on. So the question is, do we support the development of a low barrier shelter site for community members experiencing homelessness with the goal to access permanent housing as soon as possible? Yes or no? The low barrier, again, means that it's open to as many people as possible. They can come and get in there and start having taken part of that shelter. So this question takes the previous question that we had about develop a shelter site. We're looking at now making it a little narrower. What kind of focus do we do in the shelter site? Anyone else? It looks like it's slowed down. We'll show the results there. %. The next question. Next question. The city should be providing shelters and wraparound services for community members experiencing homelessness. Do you agree, somewhat agree, are you neutral, somewhat disagree, or disagree? And wraparound services and providing shelters, that's basically that service of getting them back into permanent housing. It's another way of saying that. The counseling and the education and the training that's there.
Hi, this is Alicia Beamer.
Go ahead.
Is it only the city that should be providing those, or like in coordination with the county and other folks?
I think this would be read as the city would be involved in providing it. It's not necessarily that the city would set up its own department to do that. It may be through a third party, nonprofit organizations in the county and things like that.
Okay,
There's the results.
Yeah, I just couldn't answer it. Okay, so it's in coordination with other folks.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So here's what we've got. looking at those results, we have the two blue stars on the map are the City Hall and the Community Center, where we're currently having a camp. We have some camps there. We have 8 individuals staying at the Community Center. We're 8 tents at the Community Center. We have 3 at the City Hall under the eaves. It grew to 4. We actually have them in the park as well around City Hall where they're staying. We've seen some successes there. We've had some challenges as well, and some opportunities there. So the other stars are locations that we've identified in the community. The red star is the warming shelter site. The purple star is a piece of property we own out on Highway 99, just inside the city limits, just past the industrial park. And the gold star is a new piece of property that the city purchased just a little bit over a month ago. It's an 1.5 acre piece. So our current sites are the blue stars at City Hall and the Community Center. There's 8 tent sites at the Community Center. There's 3 tent sites, 4 at the City Hall. They're basically supervised, and they're supervised part-time. If we were running a shelter or had a contractor or a third party running a shelter for us, there would be 24-hour supervision going on. Rules were established. We had specific rules for the residents there. They actually signed the rules, and there were violations of some of those rules, and those residents were trespassed from the property. Or if the rule was such that they could be arrested and cited for the violation of the laws associated with it, they were arrested. We had instances where some of the residents didn't get along very well with each other. And we actually had one gentleman in jail for 3 weeks as the judge tried to get him into a mental service facility so that he could take care of some of his issues that he was associated with him that caused him to react to other tenants that were there. All of those were addressed. They were held accountable. We were able to address those quickly because we were supervising and we had the rules established. We've had some successes as well. What's interesting is working with homeless individuals. It's an individual process. What happens and how they react and how you work with them is a case by case thing. And maybe this is why the federal government and the state government can't get their act together, because they aren't used to working with people individually. They like things that are one size fit all or fit majority or whatever. And they push it down to the local governments and the citizens and the communities, because we interact with people and we can work with individuals and we can deal with the differences there. We've had several individuals that we've had rejoin with their families after working at the community center for a while and getting familiar with what's going on. Some of them got going to the showers and started doing other things and getting their lives back in order, and found out that they could actually get back in touch with their family. And we helped them get to their family members to support them and recover. We've got several that have jobs now. We had one young man who was really excited. He got a job and now he's going to get an apartment. Yeah, 1.5 year wait on the list. We've got somebody that's getting counseling as well and has a job. And so those are positive successes that have happened one person at a time. Our proposed plan, and this is where we get into what we've presented to the council as the approach that we've looked at for the last couple of years in trying to figure out how to address homelessness here in Cottage Grove. We want to decommission. We have to decommission the community center and city hall sites, especially the community center site, by May 1st. The library roof leaks like a sieve. It's at least 10 years beyond its lifetime, and it's been leaking for the last couple of years. And we have a contractor coming in on May 1st. He's bringing in the roofing materials and the forklift and the job shack and all this stuff. And he's going to be taking up the space where the campsite is. So we need to move them from the community center by May 1st. We'd like to, and this is the proposal, is to open a temporary, immediate, low barrier shelter at the warming shelter site, managed and operated by an organization that's experienced in shelter management and operation, with an emphasis on assisting people to get into and access permanent housing options. That would operate from about May through August. We hope earlier than that, but it depends on how fast we can get the other site prepared. We'd like to develop a regular, immediate, low barrier site shelter site in consultation with a third party experienced in running it. So we'll work with them to get it set up and handle 32 to 40 individuals. Now remember, our number of homeless in Cottage Grove is 188. This gets us a little ways. We close the warming shelter site and move all the individuals and the shelters from the warming shelter site to the low barrier site that we'd be creating during that May through August. Then we'd assist with the siting and development of a permanent low, very low, or extremely low income housing units, working with another third-party organization and experience in housing and low-income citizens. And that's to begin immediately. And then we'll develop other opportunities for private involvement with this. So the warming shelter site. What we'd like to do, it's closed. It closed on March 31st. It's about a 0.43 acres. As shelters have electricity installed to all of the shelters. You can see them there on the map, the little red star and the little, it just happened to get an aerial photo on one of the mapping programs that shows the warming shelters set up. We'd have to bring in the mobile shower on a periodic basis there while we're using it as a temporary site. There are 17 shelters there. There's 18 buildings. One of the shelters is used as an administration hut. But if our organization we work with has another facility or a piece of equipment they can bring in to use as an office or for the staff, then we could use that 18th unit as a lodging place as well. We'd use the site, and it would only be used until the new location is set up. And then all the pallet shelters from this location would be moved to the new site. And the location then would be essentially decommissioned, and we'd leave the infrastructure there, the electrical connections, so we could use it for events and activities. Bohemian Mining Days could use it for vendors, or we could have the markets there, or activities, or bicycle groups that come ride the trail. They could use the site and things like that. So it could be a wonderful addition to the park space there. Our possible shelter site. This is our property that we own on Highway 99. This is a piece of property that we purchased last year to put R Street through. And you can see R Street there. This is R Street through the industrial park. And this corner of the property, we have separated that off now so R Street can come through and join Highway 99. We anticipate working on that later this summer and then taking R Street all the way over to Sweet Lane and completing that portion of our R Street loop. The property is about 0.59 acres, and that's after we remove the piece for R Street. There's a house on the property that the city owns, and the house could become a location for administration. It's got kitchen, it's got shower facilities, there's counseling space and training spaces in the bedrooms that could be used. There's room on this site for 33 pallet shelters. We have 15 more pallet shelters coming from Lane County that they've purchased for us, and they should be arriving in the next week or two. And then we have our 17 at the warming shelter. We'd install the 15 shelters when they arrive on this site, and we do some groundwork. We'd have to get the electrical installed here, and then we could move the people from the warming shelter site to this site, and then remove the empty pallet shelters over to this site as well, and use this as a site. The site on Douglas, it's a 1.5 acre piece of property that we've purchased. We've cleaned it up. We've removed the house that was on there and cleaned up a lot of the debris and garbage that had been left on the property, removed a motor home that had been abandoned on the site, and have cleaned it up considerably. We've been working with Homes for Good and looking at this as a possible site for some low income and very low income housing. We could probably get at least 50 units on this piece of property of low income housing. We could probably get more than that. Homes for Good is building, and you have a flyer, I believe, or there's some on the table on the side from Homes for Good showing some of their projects. We have a couple projects in town here that they've worked on. The Riverview Terrace is one of their projects. They've been running that since 1968. The Legion homes that are built behind the American Legion Hall, the tiny homes there, they built those and they manage those. On this site, we could construct a multi-story building on the south end of the property, and that's down here on this end, and have 50 units in a multi-unit structure there. And as we taper towards the north end of the property where the residential area is, you could drop down to townhomes and tiny homes to fit into the neighborhood and have that facility. let's go back here. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with the public, the possible shelter site, we have Chris McAllister here. He is the executive director of Carry It Forward, an organization that runs shelters. And you have some information. There's some information over on the side, as well as on the city's webpage, information on projects and programs that they run. And I've asked him to give us a little 5 minutes about how they operate their shelters and what they do and some of the goals and efforts they work through with the individuals that are there, and why this site would be a good location. Chris, or Arwen, or both of you.
We're going to both jump in. Hi, my name is Arwen Lansky. I'm the founder and co-director of Carry It Forward, a 501c3 in Eugene, Oregon. We now work in across Lane County in rural areas as well as Eugene and Springfield. We started in 2017, mostly doing street outreach, and have grown into running camps and running shelters, 24/7 emergency shelters, mostly through COVID funding. One of the things that we're excited about, and I just want to thank all of you for engaging at this level, and I want to thank you for the thoughtful approach here. You're already not Eugene, I just want to assure you. Very excited about how Cottage Grove cares, and is also caring about safety, and is caring about appearance, and is caring about welfare of everybody in your citizenry, including unhoused folks. Through our work, we know that unhoused folks have all kinds of different backgrounds and diverse experiences and where they're at. And so our organization really meets people where they're at. We believe that everyone has something to offer. We just have to figure out what they're good at and what their skills are. And most of the folks on the street are just trying to survive. So once we, hit stabilization happen, our program really wraps around people with goal setting. We figure out where they're at right now and where they want to get to, and then we help them get there. And that could be any number of things, whether it is just I need to get off the street to a temporary housing situation, or whether I need to get from my temporary housing situation to a long-term housing situation. We are there for those steps. We help break it into manageable steps, and we help connect people to the services that they need to get to those things. And so I'm just giving you an introduction. I want Chris to describe a little bit more about what we have in mind for Cottage Grove.
Thank you. I want to just echo thank you for having this thoughtful response. We liked the properties that were shared, and we gave feedback on each one. We figured 99 was a little bit more agreeable because people who are going through the processes, everybody who has experienced homeless has their own unique journey, and it doesn't need to be on display for everybody in town. We want to make sure that people have a dignified approach. And so we don't need people in fences in the middle of downtown working through their stuff. And so we figured, as these are your community members, as these are people who, when they recover, when they get over their economic barriers, when they get over their health barriers, they are coming in, and you won't recognize them as the people who are in the shelters because they were able to do so in their own space, in their own time. And so we felt 99, while it is a little bit away from the downtown center, it's a way for people to be engaged. There's also a site that's already there that has capacity to have classrooms, to have counseling rooms, to be able to engage with that. There's already trains going out there. There are a lot of people going back and forth. There's noise out there, but it's also a few residential areas as opposed to right down in downtown. We want to make sure that also people have access to poured in classes, have telemedicine, have doctors, nurses, and other people that we've paired up with to be able to meet people where they are. So again, we think that while every site has its pros and cons, downtown, there's a lot more issue mitigation. There's a lot more having to respond directly to residential complaints, as people do sometimes have night terrors, sometimes have flashbacks, and we don't get to choose when that happens. We just know that we need to be caring and compassionate and allow them to have a safe place to get over their needs. And so we're excited as a low barrier. We take people as they are, as they come. Sometimes that barrier is your companion animal. Sometimes that barrier is your partner. A lot of our shelters have gender splits. They have single occupancies. We want to carve a space that reflects the needs and population of Cottage Grove. So having a space where you can move around a little bit. Maybe we need a space to Conestoga's out, or not Conestoga's, sorry, pellet structured out a little bit more. Maybe we need to address and give them a bigger unit. We like to be able to meet the needs, and we feel like 99 has a little bit more room to grow. As you saw, the space was there. While it's not downtown, it does have access to your guys' surface. You already offer transportation services. You already have some of the medical supports coming in. Let's see it all connect through these types of properties. Any other questions? Please.
Thank you. No, if you have comments or questions, write them down so that we can get those to the council and they can address those that way. Oh. So later you can respond on that too. So yeah. We looked at a number of other sites as we looked at this site as a possible location. We looked at the wastewater treatment plant. We have a spot there that we could put it next to the wastewater treatment plant, but that's not a good place to put people next to the wastewater treatment plant. The additional piece of it is the piece of property we'll probably be using for the contractors later this summer when they repair the clarifier, so they'll need to bring equipment in. So that took that out. One of the other sites was a piece of property inside an area by parks. And if we have those laws that are saying that, hey, the public lands can be used for camping, if the space is full, then they're going to be just outside the shelter site with tents and campgrounds and everything. And that just isn't going to be something that we'd be able to enforce and take care of. So this site just worked out to be the best site. It has a house. The other places didn't have that infrastructure that would be so valuable to actually use. The possible low-income piece of property, the variety of and everything there is great for us and a wonderful opportunity. Jacob Fox is here tonight as well from Homes for Good, and I didn't ask him if he wanted to say anything, but if he wanted to talk a little bit about what Homes for Good does. They do have a great flyer over on the side that shows some pictures of what they've done in the communities in Cottage Grove and around the county. They are our affordable housing authority. And here he comes up, he can give a little brief description. Yep, this is Steve, not Jacob. Yeah, we caught that. Yes, Carrie caught that. Yeah. And Steve.
Oh, yes, I'm actually not Jacob, I'm Steve. Jacob wasn't able to make it tonight. And I also would recognize Michelle Thurston, who is one of the board chairs, who's a longtime Cottage Grove resident, is also here. And she does a lot in the affordable housing, both locally and at the state level nationally. Yeah, so we're excited. We're just here to help, to hear what the community needs. We've been struggling with the same issue in the metro area building.
Get closer. There you go.
No. Okay. I'll start. So as the Lake County Housing Authority, we're really here to help and figure out, how to address this issue. We've been trying to address the issue in the Eugene area. We built several, we call the Housing First model developments now that are up and running for a little while. What they have is the supportive services there, and people can come in right off the street, get services. It's challenging. It's expensive because the services aren't free, but we do have, I think, a pretty good model. And again, we'll have to right size it for Cottage Grove. We're just here to help out. And I'll stick some of these flyers over here that have kind of some examples of some different developments that we've done. And so, yeah, hopefully we can all get this done together. So thank you.
So one of the key pieces that we need to remember is the public shelters will not be enough. We have 188 people in the community experiencing homelessness. About 133 are adults or adults without children. Because of the current housing crisis, it will take at least 3 years to build the capacity to make a difference. So we're going to need some assistance from citizens, businesses, and organizations to create additional temporary or permanent housing in addition to what we're doing and trying to in the proposal. So, question for you. Going back to this proposal, do you support the use of the warming shelter site for a temporary shelter site until the low barrier location can be prepared? Yes or no? So it looks like about 87% support using the warming shelter site for a temporary site. Next question. The city should use the warming shelter site as the low barrier shelter location. So instead of using the Highway 99 site, should the city use the warming shelter site as the low barrier site? Do you agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, or disagree?
So this is using the place by the dog park instead of the one on 99?
Yes. Yeah, so this is using the warming shelter location as the location for the low barrier instead of the Highway 99 site. Instead of using the warming shelter as a temporary location while we build or fix up the warming shelter, the other site, this would be using it regularly. Our street would be later, late in the summer, next spring.
Down concern of that is the driving or walking. It's already dangerous. What would you think about that?
So it looks like about 50% disagree that we should not use the warming shelter site as the low barrier location. The city should use the Highway 99 site as the low barrier shelter location. So temporarily they would be at the warming shelter site and we'd be doing the upgrading, putting the shelter, the pallet shelters and stuff in place at Highway 99, and that would become the low barrier shelter location. Looks like it's slowed down, and 64% agree that the 99 site should be used as a low barrier location. Question number 19. There's only 25, so we're almost done, guys. The city should be actively seeking ways to increase low-income housing availability. Do you agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, or disagree? %, say the city should be seeking ways to increase low-income housing. 71%, low-income housing availability. No, we'll bounce around. Next question. The city should be purchasing land for low-income housing projects. Do you agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, or disagree? So we already own one piece that we're putting on the table to do this with. This would be, should we be looking at purchasing other land for low income to share and work with Homes for Good on? About 41%. So we should be doing that to help participate. So in conjunction with this stuff that the city's doing, and we have some opportunities right now. One of the reasons why it's important for us to have this town hall is the city council is looking at the money that we've received from the federal government, which specifically has listed in it addressing the needs of homeless and homelessness in your community. And so that's one of the reasons that we're doing this town hall, so they can decide how much or what portion or what kind of programs they'd be using some of that funding from the federal government to help with this. Yeah, so it's really, the funding that's available will help us get a lot of this established. And so some of the information you've provided tonight would be useful for the council to allocate or prioritize some of that spending. Some of the other programs that we have in the community that we'd like to look at and get some ideas or thoughts on. We can't do it all. There's other public needs or other ways to try to address some of the housing that needs to occur. And so one of the ideas is to adopt, and this has been done in Springfield as well as Eugene and other places. Medford, I think, has it as well. They've adopted an ordinance to allow private sheltering programs to be done. So private property owners could operate a transitional housing or overnight camping. And it would authorize the city to approve those housing facilities, either they're city run or privately run, as long as they meet certain minimum health and safety standards, and to allow the city to approve privately managed transitional campgrounds or transitional housing or campgrounds. So residents could participate and have somebody that's homeless in an RV in their driveway or in a tent in their backyard. They'd have to apply for the opportunity to do that. There'd be restrictions on how close they could be to property lines and health requirements. They have to provide restroom facilities and water and those things. But are these programs, and churches could provide space in their parking lots for camping with a shelter or for RVs. Those opportunities would be another way to get additional housing into the community. So, do you agree that private property owners, churches, business, and residents should be allowed to apply for permission to host overnight camping on their property? Do you agree? Somewhat agree? Neutral, somewhat disagree, or you disagree?
And I just wanted to add that this dovetails with a change in the law in session 2021 session also. So it was allowed for churches, but it was recently expanded to businesses, residents, etc. So it's not a requirement that this be provided in communities, but it's an allowance that land use laws could accommodate these kinds of programs. And much smaller cities than those named by Richard have already passed legislation to this effect. So their codes are allowing this to try to dig into that, the homeless population that the city doesn't feel it can house itself.
There's the response from the polling right now, and we'll add the cards in later and see how that changes them. There's other programs that are going on, the city's pushing and helping, trying to support Oregon Share. Hopefully most of you have heard about Oregon Share. If you haven't, please call Teresa Cowan at the Community Center, 942-1185. That's right, Teresa, right? And we can get more information to you about Oregon Share. This is an opportunity that if you have a spare bedroom or in your house and you need to rent, you want to rent it out to somebody, they are matching people, much like a dating service. They'll help you find the right person. and you can have them in your home. So if you need some company, you need somebody else there, you can make a little bit of income off that, as well as providing needed health shelter. This is going on around the state. It's a great program to not fit for everybody, but it's an opportunity. And if you look at the old pictures of Cottage Grove, and there's one that was taken in the Tree Streets neighborhood, the Northwest neighborhood, and there's a house, and they had a sign in the window that said border needed. I mean, it's going back in history, looking at those opportunities to share housing that's available that's maybe not being used completely. The city of Cottage Grove in 2008 was one of the first cities in the state to adopt accessory dwelling units and approve them in our housing code, in our development code, an ADU. And so you can build a small little cabin on your property and put that on your property and have that in the backyard or whatever. There are certain requirements that are needed on there for size of lot and everything. But you can put this house, a little house on your property, a tiny home essentially, and you can rent it out and make some money that way. And those opportunities are there. We actually have on the city's webpage 2 approved plans. So if you want to do an ADU, you could go to our website, pick one of those plans, and it's already approved. And you could then just apply for the building permit and you're ready to go. You don't have to go get an architect to draw up the plans. It's already done and finished for you. Thank you, City of Eugene, for sharing those plans with us. Eugene also has other plans that you can buy on their website that would also meet the building code's requirements. So if you wanted something different. We're currently got 120 units or more in development in Cottage Grove. If you've been on 10th Street or you've been on Gateway, you've seen those. That's going to have an impact, a little bit of an impact as it moves people into those units, but those are going to be middle to high income housing units. We have Commissioner Buck here with us, and one of the other programs that's exciting, we'd asked Commissioner Buck if she wanted to come up and talk about what Lane County's doing around mental health. This is a big deal for us, and I mentioned earlier the gentleman that we had in the jail that we housed for 3 weeks trying to get services for him. And so we're really excited that we have this potential for the services from Lane County. And Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I know it's been a long evening. I'm Heather Buck, I'm your Lake County Commissioner, and one of the gaps in care that we know of at the county for those that are unsheltered and those that may just be on the brink of being unsheltered is mental health care. And we don't really have a facility for folks to go and have respite care and have psychologists and doctors available to them in order to get into a space where they can move into permanent housing. So I wrote an article in the Sentinel recently about a program that we are working on, which is a mental health stabilization center. This is a facility that anybody can go, drop in 24/7 for up to 30 days. It will have beds for youth. It will have beds for adults. It has the possibility of serving up to 6,700 people a year and saving millions and millions of dollars out of our first responder and emergency services across the board. We are currently trying to find a location to either build or renovate a building in order to provide that care. Unfortunately, we know that so many people are trying to self-medicate in order to get through the day. And we have people at home, even young kids, that we're seeing that unfortunately are turning to suicide. And we don't want to see that happen any longer. And so we are championing a mental health stabilization center that we hope to have local services out to the full community in Lane County and work with a foods-like system in order to help facilitate people to actually get the care they need and not perpetuate the unhousing crisis that we're seeing right now, and able to, what we would say, put a finger in the dike so that we can actually get them the services and move them out to permanent housing and be successful and not have them re-enter onto our streets again. Thank you for letting me share.
So there's a number of other things that we're trying to do and fit into this package. And one of the things we've been doing over the last 2 years as well is working with the county and working with other organizations and trying to collaborate. That's one of the reasons that the proposal contains this working with these other organizations that are tied in with other communities and other organizations so that we can take a more collaborative approach at addressing this on a regional basis as well. So to recap, for those of us like me who wanted to see the proposal in more of a graphic format, here's what our basic proposed roadmap is for how and what we want to do for housing and taking care of the homeless situation in Cottage Grove. So first, we want to close the community center and city hall camps by May 1st and open a temporary warming shelter site that will operate hopefully from May to August as we get and develop the low barrier site either on the Highway 99 property. And then we will continue to seek a better location. I mean, the Highway 99 site does have its challenges, but it's something that we've got, and we can reasonably use it and get it started and up with a low cost and effectively get something moving. But hopefully, and we have some congressional representatives online listening to this presentation tonight, that hopefully as the community gets behind and they see what communities are faced with in doing this and addressing the problems that have been created through policies on the federal level or the state level and how those have affected rural communities around the country, we can see some additional funding come and support for what communities are trying to do. At the same time, we'll be preparing and adopting those ordinances to establish those objectively reasonable regulations that we talked about, that you've answered some questions on. And those will be done through May through September as the council addresses those at different points during their meetings and everything. And we will seek funding and begin the development of the low-income housing options, working with Homes for Good. We have August 2025, it may take longer than that, to get something constructed as we look at funding sources that Homes for Good would need to go to and working specifically through some of the federal agencies and state agencies to get some of that funding. So that's our basic roadmap. There's more on there. More adjustments would be made. I mean, this is something that changes, and it will change as we see opportunities or other things pop up that may be a better approach and continue to adjust. But your next question then is that proposal, that roadmap, the proposal presented tonight is a reasonable approach to address homelessness in Cottage Grove. Do you agree? Do you somewhat agree? Are you neutral? Do you somewhat disagree? Or do you disagree? So it looks like it's starting to slow down. We'll look at 67%. If it were up to you, what changes, if any, would you make to the proposal presented tonight? So hopefully you still have cards left at your table. If you don't, raise your hand. Mindy will get you some more cards. We're winding down. The questions get tougher. If you have skinny thumbs, please use your phone to.
And again, if anybody would like to speak, just flash your mute icon to back and forth between green and red. I'll keep an eye out for it.
Hello, Jake.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Stephen Lawn. I got a quick question for you. If I'm looking at my math right, we have 188 individuals homeless in Cottage Grove at the last count, 133 single adults. So we have 55 adults plus children. Do we have an idea of how many family units that breaks down to, those 55?
I don't know if we know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm assuming there are 2 plus. So you're looking at least 25 or less. And we really haven't just had any discussion about family. You know, I like the pallet solution really doesn't address family units.
Right.
So I'm looking at adults plus children as possibly a priority. And I just don't see that. We haven't had a discussion of that.
What I can tell you is that what we've been seeing as far as the actual unsheltered camping, we have not seen families with children doing that, at least right around here. I know they exist, in Lane County, but we haven't seen that in Cottage Grove specifically. We think most of the families with children are either doing like the motorhome living or the, moving from spare room to spare room.
Just about another minute. It looks like we're still getting responses in. This is a long one. Please take your time.
But yeah, this will be the family part will probably be the next piece to try to bite off.
Okay,
Jake,
I
do you
know
know
it's
if
a small. Sorry, I'm done.
I was just going to ask if that also includes teenagers that are under 18.
Yes, yeah, anything under 18.
Okay. So they could still be a single, they're just not classified as an adult.
Right, and we have had some teenagers staying in like the warming shelters occasionally. Though right now the younger folks have more services available to them through organizations like Looking Glass and things like that.
Yes, okay.
Last question. Do you have any additional comments that you would like to make regarding homelessness in Cottage Grove that you want to get to the City Council?
Before, I was typing something when it switched over. I don't know if it's going to log my question number 23.
Oh, hopefully it did.
Okay. It's about 2 words away from the end.
Oh, no. Did it disappear on you? Okay. It should have. So go ahead and kind of rewrite on the card a little
What
bit.
if you go back to it? Will it come up for him?
Well, then it'll shut off people here.
Oh, right. So
His best bet is to make a comment on the card. So as people finish up this comment here on number 24, there's some leaving, and so we do want to express our thanks for everyone who did come tonight. It's been a long evening. I want to say that as a local public official for 35 years working in local government, this is exciting. This is why I work in cities. You've helped the council a lot tonight. They are really struggling with the questions and the information, and your input will be used. And so thank you so much for coming tonight. We have one more question if you want to answer that one. We're going to be putting all of these responses and the information on our website. So if you want to be notified when it's posted, just leave us your email on this last question when we finish collecting the ones that are going on right now. Or you can check our website next week. We hope to have it done by the end of this week. We have probably close to 200 people here, and there's a lot of cards I've seen getting filled out on the tables, plus we had about 60 people online as well responding. So great job, everyone. Thank you so much. If you want to stick around and put your email in, please do that when we change the slide here. But otherwise, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. And have a nice evening. It's 9:30 or 9:29. We end this right on time.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and participating in this. And I'll hang around here. If anybody wants to come up and talk to me afterwards, feel free and drop off any written statements you want to make. Thank you.
And that thank you, of course, applies to all you online folks, too. We appreciate your input.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, and now you can put in this last box, you can put in your email if you would like to be notified when all of the paper information has been typed in.
No, Steve.